Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the COVID Effect. I'm so grateful that you guys are spending some time with us on this virtual adventure. My name is Desean K, and I am one of the co-artistic directors of Collaborative Artist Bloc, along with Kiana Richard. And we're really excited because this is actually our foray into virtual programming, other than some stuff that we did earlier on during COVID. Like so many theaters throughout the country and world, we have not been able to gather in person. And so we are learning how to navigate this virtual space. And so what Collaborative Artist Bloc has done, we have focused on the social justice part of our mission. And one of the things that we as a collective have really appreciated during this time is an opportunity for dialogue and conversation. And so hence what you are experiencing today is our art and conversation series that we have put together as Collaborative Artist Bloc with the amazing people over at Outside In Theater. Outside In is a new theater company. They are working to nurture brave spaces for all, including Black, Indigenous, AAPI, Latinx, global majority people, and white allies. So we will be posting their information and Collaborative Artist Bloc information in the chat. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to show you our first work from this series that we're doing. The COVID Effect, like I said, is an art and conversation series where essentially what I've done, or what we've done, is that we have asked an artist and also just community members, just the engaging questions that we're going to dialogue about. And hopefully that will be a beautiful starting point for us to engage with the conversation with you guys today. So please engage with the chat if you have any questions about any of our experts or anything to come. But in the meantime, right now, just enjoy the video and we'll see you briefly.
It's not by chance that we are the sickest. It's not by chance that the system is reckless. It is designed to draw red lines through our lives. They bully us out of our brownstones, eliminating our brown tones, leaving us with cheap prices and corroded arteries that we flock to because these addictions are what they bought too. And it's not by chance that my dad is a homeless Black man who asks his country, am I going to die out here? Are you going to let me die out here, along with his name written on his hand in case anyone finds him, buried under the weight, the lack of assistance at the government gates, while tiny drops of death invade tent cities and all of our money goes to these committees that pay no mind while being paid. The years I've lost with my father, the years he's lost within himself, underwater in a tank designed for him to sink, and it's not by chance. These infinite lines of misfortune have made this country a fortune. It is more than all of the ground that has been laid, the seeds that have been sown, that have been reaped, but the benefits not shown to the people whose bones have known it. And they know it. It is nothing more than a 400-year-old magician's facade, conjuring tricks, a sleight of hand gambling our time, and it is our time. Wake up. This was all by design.
The word impact has become just a part of my being. Because this past year, almost a year and a half, has impacted every aspect of my life.
At one time, I'm very extroverted. I would talk to anybody, say anything to anybody, just make familiar conversations because, like I say, people are people. But nowadays, you have to be careful because you don't know what a person have in their heart, and you don't know when you look at it, you would say, you don't really realize that somebody might be thinking different of you than you might be thinking about them.
It's definitely made me look deeper into things as far as like society and politics. I think kind of tragic that on top of the coronavirus pandemic, the violence that has been growing in addition to that, just compounded things. So yeah, it's been a lot. It's been very heavy.
Part of the pandemic is, okay, so I've watched the news. So I gotta watch the news because you gotta know what's going on. But there's a part of me is like, okay, I can't take it. If I hear anything else, because I hear about the pandemic, but then there are all of the other aspects. My thought is it's not even wise not to watch it because I need to know, okay, so there's the pandemic, but there's a new variant that's out. Well, will this vaccine help with that variant? Is that going to protect me? All of that. So the conversion on it is just so, it's scary, it's weighty, weights you down. But then there's the other side of that says, no, hell no, I'm not going to give in to that.
I think everybody's been speculating because we've all been cramped up in our homes and people can't go anywhere, and there's already this tension, there's already this anxiety, there's already this frustration at the fact that there's this disease running rampant and nobody has, like, help us. We're all helpless, right? The only thing we can do is put a mask on, and that's it. That's all you can do. And then to see this happening on television, to see someone's life, to watch someone die on television because of the color of their skin. I think that it was just a convergence of all these things to where I feel like the pandemic made people realize how fragile life is, how fragile our society is, and how things aren't always what we think they are.
Funny enough, with everything that's gone on, especially regarding like the systemic violence, it's made me take a deeper look as to why things are happening, as opposed to just taking things for face value. This past year, of course, emotions have been triggered and it's been very highly sensitized with good reason. But however, I've also kind of tweaked or changed my train of thought to where with all that's happened, we can't necessarily react based on emotion. And I think that's what's happened a lot within this past year. And as I continue to watch things unfold, it's lead me to ask myself the questions, is there more behind this? Is there something underlining? Is there something that I'm not seeing? And I don't want to just be led blindly because I'm the type of person, I need to see everything in order to judge everything fairly, no matter what my political stance is, no matter what my socioeconomic level is, no matter what my race, my culture is. It's only fair.
I want to hope that I've gained some wisdom from it, and it's highlighted some things that are very, very scary, things that are hurtful, things that are challenging. It's saying, where do I fit in that? And where do I choose to fit?
This older actress that I've worked with before, basically, just kind of called me out on my BS because she's like, have you been to the city council meetings? Are you at those, the board of supervisors meetings? Are you in the like ground level voting on what things that are seemingly small that actually play a big part in the long run? And I'm like, oh, no. I went to my first board of supervisors meeting during the pandemic, and it was eye-opening. You get to hear the people talk that you're supposed to vote on, and you get to say, oh no, what's coming out of your mouth is not what I agree with.
I initially was hesitant. I'm like, nah, I need to find out what's really going on with it. And so I mean, like copiously would take notes, or then I was tuned into the news to find out what was going on. Because you hear all this, oh, it takes 10 years to get this stuff done, to make this happen and all this. So I'm thinking, okay, 10 years, well, they got this new vaccine, they're gonna try it on the Black people first, I'm sure. Like, nope, not happening.
My thoughts on the vaccine. Okay, so let me preface this by saying, you guys already know, as I stated before, I'm a respiratory therapist. I have been for almost 29 years. With that, I'm also a veteran of the Air Force, Reserve. So through the military, I've been poked for everything, smallpox, anthrax, and I'm quite frankly am tired of being the guinea pig per se. I'm not comfortable with this vaccine right now, period, point blank, because number one, I think it was developed too quickly.
I was a little hesitant at first because it seemed like it came out so quickly, and I am about testing, make sure that is correct before you put it in my body. But just hearing more information about it, knowing how vaccines are created, and knowing that there has been the base of the vaccine, I believe, that we took had already been in something that was being worked on and researched years prior. I think I'm correct with
Yeah, well, I mean,
yeah.
SARS and COVID have been researched for years, right? I mean, this is just a different strand. So, but they've been researching SARS for quite some time.
Number two, it's not FDA approved. A lot of people are under the misconception that, just because it's given, it's FDA approved. What it is emergency use authorized. It's different. So, and again, don't get me wrong, I think the intentions are great. This pandemic has got to stop. But I think for me, it's just too quickly. Now, I would never say never, but right now, I just don't feel comfortable because there's not enough in-depth research done as to the consequences and side effects of this vaccine. I've known 3 people already. One that has had COVID previously, got the vaccine, had COVID again. 2 that never tested for COVID in the past, got the vaccine, and were sick for a week and a half after the COVID vaccination.
I understand why people are afraid of the vaccinations. I understand being cautious of putting something in your body and wanting to know what that is and wanting to know that it's been properly vetted. Because, I've talked to some nurses who were hesitant to take it, who wanted to wait for a while to see how it would affect other people's bodies. Historically, I'm sure you've heard the many talking points about communities of minorities, minority communities being taken advantage of in the science world, in the medical world, being used as guinea pigs. I understand how people can be hesitant and not trust, not trust the science. I think it's trusting the people behind the science.
I always knew in my mind that the minute the vaccinations were available, it was something that I was going to try to get. So I'm not scared of the vaccination. I believe in the science behind it. I believe that these people aren't really out to get you in order for you to be able to avoid this great disaster that we had.
So I thought about that, and my perspective shifted. And it shifted, one, because of the research, because there were trusted people who I talked to. And I have to tell you, because of the fact there's a sister, Dr. Kizzy Corbett, who was one of the people who developed the Moderna vaccine. Looking at her, looking at her background. But I think the main thing was that I have my mother. If I were to be able to bring something to her, to impact her in her life, that would have devastated me, because I do participate in her care.
What I'm most afraid of is, because of everything that's happened, especially with now the vaccine being the hot topic, I'm just very afraid that it's going to bring about a type of segregation, if this makes sense. Meaning that those who choose to have the vaccine will, go about their own lives, but those that choose not to, it's going to be like, oh, well, you can't enter here because you don't have the vaccine. And why haven't you taken the vaccine? And it's going to be that type of prejudice or anything like that for those who haven't taken the vaccine. And I think that's going to divide the country. And that's what I'm most afraid about. At any time when there's a difference, rather than people being understanding, it seems to drive a wedge that much deeper between people. And I fear that. I fear that, because there's enough going on in our society that we don't need that. Yeah, it's something that I think about a lot.
Things like the pandemic, things like being stuck and not being able to feel or see each other. And, the homeless population in LA is huge, and not being able to, to experience what you see and how other people and their, hardships are going through, you realize that, hey, you know what, it's just not about you. And I think the aspect of us being a collective human species, it's, we have to work together, right? We all have to get along. And I think that somehow has kind of went away. And I think, we need to get that divisiveness kind of, in a point where we all have to talk to each other. We all live in this country together, right? I mean, we can't just, favor one side over the other. There has to be a solution. I don't know what that solution is, but, I think it does start with conversation.
It's not just about us as individuals, it's about the country as a whole. And I think a lot of people have operated in that way of individual, even though, we think we're loving and caring and we're thinking about other people, but I don't think we think about it in a more in-depth way. So what the solution is, okay, so this whole time, have I been thinking of things just for me in the sense of individual, and I haven't been thinking of the whole, because the reason why we have people on the streets the way we do is because we haven't been thinking of things as a whole.
I love being vulnerable. It makes me uncomfortable. And I think a lot more people need to be uncomfortable in order to find resolutions and feel better about themselves, because it's more room outside than it is keeping it inside and, just knot it up to where it's going to eat you from the inside out. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this.
Okay, all right. So great. So we have a number of panelists that are going to be joining us. And like I said, the video is the starting point of our conversation. I just want to pick out a couple things that, really resonated with me from what everyone is saying. When I hear people say it's been a lot, even these simple things, these simple phrases, it's been a lot. It's very heavy. When Kiana says helpless, the only thing you can do is put a mask on. Just the vulnerability of that just really sends chills up my spine. And I identify with it. We talk about how fragile life is, and how people want more information, vaccine hesitancy, vaccine confusion, vaccine segregation. Some people aren't comfortable with the vaccine, and also that people are making shifts in terms of how they're experiencing this. So it's a lot to unpack. Of course, we won't be able to do it all in this conversation, but I'm grateful for what we can get done today. So first, I want to start with you, Alaska. So let me introduce Alaska. Alaska is Alaska Jackson. She graduated from AMDA. She is an actress and, as you saw, an outstanding spoken word artist, singer, and other amazing things. One thing that she's doing right now is she's the narrator for Rise to the Crown. She advocates for queer and Black stories, and her recent works include the Terry Era, a documentary style feature addressing police brutality, and she is the co-host of the podcast Justice and Juice. So one of the things that really interest us is just how you guys saw essentially the questions that came up within the video where we were talking to the people being interviewed. Essentially, that's what we asked Alaska. We asked her, we said, hey, as an artist, these are the questions that we're dealing with. And, rather than give us a narrative story, just, tell us how it impacts you and where that takes you and create a piece. And you created a really beautiful and outstanding piece. I got to see the final edited version of it, and I just think it's just really powerful. I mean, I understand and expect that because you're a powerful artist in person. So thank you for sharing that with us. But give us a little bit of, how did the questions hit you, and how did you end up creating the piece that you created?
Yeah, thank you. So this was a really important topic for me to do. I think when I was given the opportunity to sit with it for a minute, it really took me sit there and be like, what am I seeing? You know, like, what am I hearing? What are my family and my friends are hearing, and what are they going through? And we've been in this pandemic or at least this quarantine for a year, and it's all new to all of us. We're coming out of it differently. We went into it differently. And we've changed. And so I had to like really sit there and like look at that. And after sitting with it, what I found was that COVID is only one aspect of a huge problem. So the topic was like, for me, when I thought about it, it was like COVID and how that has impacted Black and Brown people. But it's one part of a 400-year-old problem, right? So I started thinking about how and why COVID was impacting BIPOC communities in disproportionate numbers. And it's because this country was founded on racist ideologies and systems, you know, to keep us the most vulnerable and easily disposable group of people. So for example, like prison industrial complex, which I personally, myself and my family have personally experienced the impact of that. My dad is currently an unhoused person in Sacramento. And he's dealt with addiction, and we've had a lot of separation in our family because of that, you know, him being in and out of the systems, which is a system that was created for him to struggle or fail. So redlining, banking, I mean, I can go on, lack of education, lack of healthcare resources, lack of mental health care, nutrition, politics, all of those. You have big franchises and massive corrupt corporations that drop their buildings into the middle of BIPOC communities, fast food, Walmart, you know, to gain customers that come back again and again. So it's not by chance, like I say in my piece, that we are the sickest people because they've specifically created it to be that way. So I hope that answered your question.
I mean, first of all, it just spoke to my heart and resonated, you know, in all the chambers of my body is, you know, what often happens when we're starting to have these conversations about what is going on in the Black and Brown community. Even this was prior to COVID and then during COVID. You know, one thing that it made me think about, and this is something I want to talk about with the panelists, is I think one of my sort of heightened COVID experiences, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I remember there was one day or 2 days in the news cycle when we were just, and this was one of the times when I was just consuming news, as Sheila says. And every time I turned on the news, it was saying something about Black people are dying, Black men are getting shot. And I literally turned to my partner. I said, I got to stop it.
Yeah.
I can't take any more of this, because every time I'm turning on the news, it's something about my skin color being attacked. And I was like, I can't take it. I can't take it. So let me introduce the panelists, because I know we want to jump in and get started. So I'm really excited about this panelist. I know we have people from all over the country viewing today. But, you know, Collaborative Artist Bloc, our mission is really to impact the Black and Brown communities in South Los Angeles. That is our target audience, and we want to have conversations. Typically on a given year, we are doing artwork and art pieces and theatrical pieces that we feel pertain to that community. With the challenges of being together, we have switched to now conversations, which is what we would have done after the show, but now we are just going directly to the conversation. And so I'm really excited about this panel, because it's a challenging panel to get together, because we have these amazing experts, and coincidentally, they also have intimate relationships with Los Angeles. Dr. Stan Peterson was born and raised in South Central, which I love as an Angelino myself. And he attended UCLA for undergraduate studies and graduated with a degree in biology. For the past 20 years, Dr. Peterson has been building and maintaining a thriving family practice at the Magnolia Family Medical Center in Oxnard, and taken on an administrative role in the Ventura Healthcare Agency. He currently serves as medical director for the Magnolia Clinic in Oxnard and the Sierra Vista Family Medical Clinic in Simi Valley. So really, really excited. Raise your hand just so we can tell people, oh, your name is on the thing, right? It's live theater. I don't really fully know what you guys are seeing, just so you know, a little behind the scenes. So I hope I'm introducing everyone and guiding you through this well enough. So Kendra Duvall. Kendra is a full-time trauma nurse and a part-time faculty professor at California State University, Channel Islands. She specializes in caring for the underserved, underinsured, and at-risk and most vulnerable patients in the community where she was raised, which is Ventura County. So again, love that we have people who have intimate relationships with Los Angeles, and I know there are people from all over the country watching, so I know that things are still going to resonate. But I really am so grateful that those are the people that we're engaging with today. And then we have Audrena Redmond. Audrena is one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter Long Beach. Her work includes identifying policy and practice changes, developing and facilitating anti-racism workshops. For nearly a decade, Audrena has been a member of the Beautiful Struggle Live radio show collective. The show airs 7 p.m. Tuesday nights on 90.7 FM KPFK Los Angeles, and discusses social, political, and economic issues, history, thought, inspiration, art, and resistance issues. So it's an amazing panel, and I'm really excited for you guys to jump into the conversation. So let me start with this. Let's talk about where we're at right now. I feel one of the challenges for me is really trying to figure out, what is my life going to look like 3 months from now? Right? And that's been taken away from us. Right now, where we are, we're at a rate where I guess California has an okay vaccination rate. I would love to hear what you guys think. What do you think of the vaccination rate? But my concern right now is that I don't feel like I can adequately predict what my life is going to look like 2 months from now, 3 months from now. Are we going to go back into masks? Are we going to? So I would love to start there and see, where do you guys feel we're at right now in this pandemic? And how should we feel about where California or the global situation is? Whoever would like to respond.
I think I'll take that one on. Thank you, Desean. By the way, thank you for having me here. I feel honored and privileged to be in this panel, and I'm really excited to talk about this, because I think this is incredibly important. And I think the bridge of the artist community and the work that's being done with just the emotion and the impact of this pandemic over the last 15 months, I think is incredible and very important. And you're right, we do have a pretty good record of vaccination, but we have currently over 33.6 million cases reported. But because of the Delta variant, what we normally look at is the 7-day case average, which is how many cases that we have per 100,000. And that helps us determine case trends. It's going up, and it's gone up about 16% to about 34 per 100,000 people over the last 7 days. As of yesterday, we had 604,000 deaths. So this is the real deal. And I think anyone who doesn't see the impact that this pandemic has had in this country and our communities where we live, I think really hasn't been paying attention. We have fully vaccinated 158.6 million people in the United States. And that represents pretty close to 50%, about 47.8% of the population. And if you look at LA County, we're at 51% fully vaccinated. In Ventura County, where I live, we're at 53.6%. So I think the response in California in particular has been pretty good. And I'm proud of the efforts, to make this happen. But I think for the rest of this question, we kind of need to start the answer off with a term that, many people may be familiar with, and that's herd immunity. And herd immunity occurs, when we have a large portion of the community, what we call the herd, that becomes immune to a disease. And then that makes the spread of disease from person to person unlikely or less likely. And as a result, the whole community becomes protected. It lends a totally new voice to It Takes a Village, right? And so it's not just those who are immune. The percentage of the population that's protected from the disease varies from disease to disease. So you look at something like measles, you actually need about 94% protection in the community in order to reach herd immunity. It's somewhat lower for COVID, but we're not 100% sure what that looks like. It could be high 70s, it could be low 80s. And it's achieved by the following methods, right? So first one is natural infection. That's you get the disease and you develop protective antibodies. There are issues impacting this that exist in the community, and that's what Alaska and what other folks have mentioned, and that's infection, with COVID and the health impact there. If you wait for people to everybody to get the disease, what is the death rate going to be overall? If we, were to try to get to that 70%, I think that total number would be really staggering. And then there's vaccines, and you get vaccinated properly. Now, vaccine hesitancy is a major, major concern because issues such as religious objections and fears about possible risk, skepticism about benefits, some of the things that we heard in the piece this morning. Especially, with evolving misinformation that's being spread rapidly via social media. That's a huge concern. And uneven vaccine rollout is another concern because communities with many resources received the vaccine and they got a coordinated response faster and more effectively than communities with poor resources, which happen to be our BIPOC communities, right? Communities of color. And vaccine equity factors in here with Black and Brown communities, as well as communities with poor social determinants, right? These are things that impact us in a health manner: housing, foods, resources, job, access, all those things. They're impacted over the majority white communities with, good social determinants of health. And then the last factor is also important, and that's vaccine effectiveness. So currently, our approved vaccines are extraordinarily effective against COVID. However, we're starting to see evidence of waning immunity. And we just don't have a data on how long this immunity is going to last with these vaccines. Just recently, Israel reported that Pfizer was only about 64% effective against the Delta variant. And that's what they're seeing, even though it's 93% effective in preventing severe and serious illness. So they're seeing that it's not preventing the mild cases, but it is preventing serious infection. So there's some benefit there, and the serious infection and the death is our biggest fear, right? And the problem is that, the longer it takes to vaccinate the community to herd immunity, the more chances this virus has a chance to infect someone and possibly mutate into a new, more infectious, potentially more deadly, and unfortunately more resistant variant strain. So this is real. This is the real deal, and this could render all our hard work meaningless. And we would have to regroup and produce effective boosters and revaccinate the vaccinated. We don't want to do that. So what we need is for the remaining population to get vaccinated. It's that simple.
So then, and this came up in the video, specifically talking about Black and Brown communities. And Alaska says it, a system that has been by design not historically supportive in the way that we, that Black and Brown people feel or have inherent trust to the system. So my question is, what, if anyone has any advice or thoughts on, as a Black person who may not always have trusted this medical system, to now then have to rely on it in terms of getting this vaccine, what would you say to that person who feels like they don't, people say that specifically, like, I don't trust this system because of the grievances that has been done against us as Black and Brown people. So then how do we then just lean over and trust this, trust the vaccine?
If it's okay with you, I'll take that question. Thank you again for having me as a part of this panel. I'm very excited to be a part of it and to be able to, impart some of the wisdom that I've gained through the medical system. And so being an emergency department nurse for 20 years, seeing the changes in medicine, watching variant strains of different diseases, whether it be, and this is just a common example, how many in the BIPOC community get their flu vaccination or their pneumococcal vaccination every year? And just like the flu vaccine doesn't cover every single strain because it's been allowed to mutate, it's the same thing. Coronavirus has been around for a long time. This is a new strain, COVID, Corona, VI. virus D, disease 19 because it occurred in 2019. This is a new strain. We're learning about it. And I get it. I get it. Just as the rest of the BIPOC community has a hard time trusting, and I'm just going to put this out there and say it as it is. If the man is doing it, if they're injecting it into their own bodies, then you got to trust it in some way. You got to trust it in some way. Yes, we've watched from afar and the man has done it. We haven't seen any, Walk of the Living Dead walking around. Nobody's mutated themselves. Nobody's turned out, with a gimp arm or with an eyeball lost. If they're doing it and they're okay with it, then we need to be okay with it. We need to protect ourselves, because just as the damage has been done in the past by the man, the damage is being done by ourselves. We are self-sabotaging. We are allowing ourselves to be subjected to a disease that will mutate within ourselves and spread it tenfold. This Delta virus is no joke. It's hit Ventura County, where I'm at, in the emergency department. And what we're seeing now is astonishing. Little children are coming in who were not subjected to the disease before, sick. The young adults who were not as subjected, who we did not see during the pandemic of 19 and 20 die, we're seeing those people come in now. And let me tell you, that is the population that is the most difficult to get to, because as we know, young adults, they think they're invincible. They think they can survive through anything. And it's not until you stood in the room, it's not until you have stood in the room with a patient who is dying and they're not allowed to have a family member near them, and they're struggling to breathe, and they're suffering and they're in pain. It's not until you're around somebody that you believe that this thing is real. What we are about to embark on with this new strain is no joke. And so what I would say to people is, I get it. We didn't trust them, but guess what? They are getting it. So why aren't we getting it? Why wouldn't we allow ourselves to gain in the same way that they gain? Immunity. This is the riches right here, folks. We have to trust. I myself fully vaccinated, the panel here fully vaccinated. We're doing just fine. I hope I have my eyebrows and my eyeballs. I look okay. I mean, I didn't mutate any of us. So we're going to be all right, folks. We are going to be okay. Do this for us.
So then I don't have
Desean, if I could.
Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, as I'm having this argument, this conversation, I won't call it an argument, a decision really with family members and with other friends. And I remind people that we have measles relatively under control in this country. We have chicken pox relatively under control. We have polio relatively under control. And that's all because of vaccinations. Our society would be far less healthy than it is now if we didn't have those vaccines. I'm thinking about when I've traveled abroad, I've had to get vaccinations at least 3 weeks in advance so that I come back healthy, right? And I did those without questioning. And thinking that this pandemic has been predicted for at least a decade. But, epidemiologists know, this is the cycle of human beings and our interactions with each other and nature and et cetera, et cetera. And so, I believe in science and I've had to measure that because there are folks who don't really understand what science is, don't understand, as my mother likes to say about the medical practice in particular, it's a practice. And so as you gather more information, yes, what you've been saying might change. And I think the variance in what's being said about the COVID and the rise of the number of people hospitalized, the number of people dying, I think people don't understand this is a moving thing. This is a transitioning, ever transforming thing. And that in and of itself is its danger. But what would I say to Black people? I say to Black people, look, I'm going to agree with Kendra that, this is not something that's being targeted at us. We are, in fact, the greater victims of it. And so we should be all the more interested in jumping out there and getting vaccinated. And, I've heard people say, well, it's not 100% proof. Well, nothing in life is. Nothing in life is 100% proof, but I would rather have some protection than no protection. Because, as we deal with the struggle between what's best for our public health and what's needed for the economy, that's the push and pull. The economy folks are going to be pushing for us to go back to work. They are pushing for things to open fully. And our folks work largely in the lower sector. Our folks work on the front line and they're going home and living with relatives, seniors, and the babies, and if, everybody's being more affected. I've been saying to people, if you love your life and you love your family, go get a vaccine. Go get a vaccine. It's science. It's not, and turn off the dang on YouTube videos with all the conspiracy theories.
Can I just speak to some of that a little bit? Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, because I think many vaccine hesitant people have stated, and we heard this in the video, right? That, we rushed this vaccine, and how can a vaccine produced so quickly be effective? And that's a commonly asked question. I get that in my office all the time, every day almost. And in reality, the technology for the vaccine, just as there was a comment just after that statement was made, that question was asked, has been around for decades. We've known about the mRNA vaccine technology for decades. We began sequencing the COVID genome, which is the genetic material that makes the virus, after the first SARS-CoV-1 epidemic back in 2001. So this isn't a new thing for us. This didn't just happen and the work start, once we got COVID-19. And the past year was really spent coordinating worldwide resources, from pharmaceutical industries, different countries, and government agencies in an unprecedented fashion, And the production of the little fat molecule that, allows that genetic material to safely enter the cells, also took some time to perfect. I think it's important that it was mentioned that, we didn't just have scientists from one section of the community and from one, ethnic group that was working on this vaccine, that a lot of the groundbreaking work and major work was done by Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett. And so I think that makes me feel more reassured that somebody out there has my back, you know what I mean? And so, that should empower us to look into this more critically and question when people say, oh, this is a redo of the Tuskegee experiment, from the 1930s. And so this is something that, is important to know. And, the work that's done in doing these clinical trials is the same work that we would do if you were to authorize and approve from the FDA, under normal circumstances. There's really no difference in those trials. There are 3 phases. They have to go through them. They're very strict. They're very stringent. We have lives on the line. What is different, though, is the ability to manufacture and deal with all of the scaled processes to get this vaccine out to large communities and mass vaccination sites that have to be done. What is different is the normal gaps that you see in performing these studies, because sometimes it takes a long time to get people to buy into a research study that, doesn't really push people to want to get involved. And so you have to find willing participants. There's times where there's just nothing going on. Well, in this particular situation, things were moving, at breakneck speed. And then there's, other, aspects of this that normally would happen if we were going to get full FDA approval, but because of this process, it was necessary to get the emergency use authorization, and that's why we have what we have. They're still going through the same approval processes. Other things out there, the vaccine, cannot cause you to become magnetic. There are no metals in the vaccine. There are no computer chips or tracking devices in the vaccine. We do track vaccinations, but we do it with a computer system through public health. There is no mark of the beast in the vaccine. I think a lot of folks in religious communities, some of the religious communities have fabricated this because they misunderstand the actual vaccine ingredients, which are the genetic material, the fat envelope molecule, and some special sugar and salt to stabilize the compound. That's it. That's all that's in there. Myth. Certain people with certain diseases can't get the vaccine. The only major contraindication is a severe allergic response or prior allergy to any of the vaccine components. That's it. And so and the most common, vaccine component is the polyethylene glycol, which is otherwise known as Miralax. You can go buy it at Costco. And another one, the vaccine does not integrate into your DNA. Vaccine works by introducing the recipe for making this spike protein of the virus, which the body sees if the virus were to naturally infect you. It's just like going over to your friend's house with a recipe for a cake and using all their supplies to make the cake. It's the same process. And by making a lot of this protein, you have an exaggerated response, which gives us the immunity. The vaccine does not give you COVID-19. The vaccine only makes a part of the virus, which is necessary to make the antibodies to allow your body to fight a real infection. Some of the side effects are really evidence that your body has seen the antigen created and is reacting to it. So you actually kind of want a little fever, you want some body aches, you want a little bit of injection site pain, because it's telling you that this vaccine is doing something in your body that you need it to do. Your kids can die of heart disease if they get a shot. That's a new one. That's a tricky one, right? There are cases of vaccine-mediated cardiomyopathy and pericarditis, and this is mostly in boys aged 16 to 24. The symptoms have been generally self-limited, and from what we know, kids recover without evidence of immediate consequences. But when you compare that issue with the risks of COVID, including the risk of multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, which is a big issue and something that Kendra, remarked about, then you have to start thinking about, do the risks of getting vaccinated outweigh the benefits, or do the benefits outweigh the risks? And it's clear that the benefits outweigh the risks. And death from COVID vaccine, by the way, is exceedingly rare. We've had more than 331 million doses of vaccine given in the US between December of 2020 and just July 6th, a couple of days ago. And there were 5,946, don't tell me where I get that, don't ask me where I got that number, reports of, well, actually anybody can go, you can get it from the CDC, it's all there, which is 0.0018%, 0.0018% of those receiving the vaccine. Now, it's not even clear in many of these cases if the vaccine was actually the cause. But in comparison with the 33.8 million cases of COVID in the United States and the 606,000 deaths, that's 1.8%. I mean, that means basically you're 1,000 times more likely to die from COVID than the vaccine.
So first of all, I just want to say this. We are having a sort of like a post-chat, a Zoom session after this, where the people who are watching, you will be able to ask questions or talk specifically, because I hear everything, and I can't believe that I'm hearing everything that, that we need to clear up in terms of vaccine misinformation. Which also sort of transitions me as much as we can to have this conversation, is like, why are we at such this, crazy divide where people, I've been in situations where people in communities where people like COVID it really doesn't exist. And then we have people in, Los Angeles where, my community members tend to take it really seriously. And, I've been reading Cast and she said, Isabel Wilkerson said, and this is before we got to COVID, that she described this time as an era of human rupture. This huge divide that's going on, not just in this country, but, occurring throughout in different places. And so, Audrena, I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. What are the things that you feel that are at play that I think have also been fueled even further by COVID? And do you agree with that statement? Are we at an era of human rupture? Is that a dramatic statement, or do you feel like we can enter into a place of more healing?
I wish I could say that we were entering into a place of more healing, but I just cannot say that. you know, as a Black person and the Black people I'm in communication with, and certainly my work as co-founder of Black Lives Matter and one of the leadership team of BLM Grassroots, you know, there are plenty of reasons for Black folks to distrust. There's plenty of trauma, you know, over and over again. And like you, Desean, I tuned into the news for the first time in 5 weeks 2 days ago. I just cannot consume it. I can read it a little bit, but I can't consume it. And so for people who are consuming news, especially if you're consuming any of the hyperbolic cable news channels, or you're watching CBS, NBC, where they give you a story, and that story in the cable news is more hyperbole and opinion, and the TV news is without a lot of deep context and is in buckets. And then you're watching YouTube and getting news from God knows who. It adds to the trauma. It adds to the feeling of uncertainty. It adds to the feeling of distrust. It adds to the feeling of this system is not for me. And while we know that the system is not for us, because we'd have to be blind to not know that, to not see that the history and the present, I think the challenge really is for people to embrace their own power in the moment, and to really capture that power by saying, I'm going to inform myself, I'm going to make wise decisions, and I'm going to hold elected leaders and others accountable, because in the end, that's how our system works. And so we would be practicing then, you know, we'd be doing what we have to do until we can get to the revolution part, right? But we gotta do that part first. We have to participate in this to heal ourselves, I think, from the trauma. There's nothing more empowering for me. I'll take myself as an example. Nothing more empowering than saying, I have had enough and I am going to engage in making something else. And I think that's what a lot of people have to do. But when you have this flood of information and you have something as scary as COVID-19, where the world shut down in those first 3 months in particular, and it was as quiet in the world as it was for me those few days after 9/11. It was like no cars moving, no airplanes moving, nothing, right? Everybody was on what is going on in the world. But it's also, and then given George Floyd's untimely murder and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery last summer, it was time for us to regroup and re-engage ourselves in the process. I think that is always true for us. And when we do that, we empower ourselves, and other people are then more accountable. But waiting passively for other folks to care, or for us to just throw it away and say they don't care, you know, the they, the who, and I'm always asking, well, who's the they? And no one has to care about us more than we care about us. And so, to me, that's us getting engaged and calling out the state-sanctioned violence for what it is, and never letting folks take their eyeball off of that.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that, and I love what you're saying. You know, how to deal with and the idea of gaining power. I guess my question, and maybe you can help with it, Kendra, is I know folks, and I have conversations where, you know, sometimes people are like, I can't get up off the couch. Like, there's just so much going on, so much information that I'm receiving. This is just my perspective, right? So this is a novice perspective. You know, I feel like you have to process trauma. And some days when you become, and I feel like for me, I've had to acknowledge a lot of trauma during this time period, right? As things started to come out more and more, and I'm starting to feel like I'm like Deborah Sanchez, who is my mom, by the way, in the video, you know, she said that she looks at people in a different way now, right? So my question is, how can one process and acknowledge trauma while at the same time then find their power and re-engage in this society, if that is the answer? It feels to me that it's like a catch-22.
So, you know, of course, in the medical community, but I think in life, the best way to process trauma is to talk about it. Talk about it, get those feelings out. get it, make it a platform with others that have experienced the same trauma or have not experienced the same trauma, and get the outsider perspective. Because maybe sometimes, and I'm not saying the trauma that we've experienced in life is not real, but sometimes people have an outside view of what they see may or may not have happened. It can give us a different perspective. I'm not saying forget the trauma. The trauma is always going to be there, but you have to heal from the trauma. And part of healing is not only talking about it, but gathering the wisdom from the traumatic incident. What could we have done better? What knowledge did we gain? What can we do now for future should something come up that's similar, like now? You know, Dr. Peterson talked about the Tuskegee and, project in which they were experimenting with us. What did we gain from that? We have so much more knowledge now, so much more knowledge that we can take that, put it together with what's going on now. And are we seeing the same precedents? Are we being held in the dark, or is everything being pretty much transparent? Like Dr. Peterson alluded to, everything's on the website. You can go look it up. It's for everybody to see. How many people in the BIPOC community are affected by this disease? How many are vaccinated? Every day, how many of us are infected? Not only is it broken down by racial or ethnicity, it's also broken down by age and gender. And you can see all this stuff. Back in the Tuskegee experiment, there was none of this transparency. And we have already moved forward with that, and we've gained that. Don't forget, be cautious, move forward with caution. Talk about it. Get wisdom from sources that are reliable, evidence-based practice. YouTube has no evidence-based practice. These are just people that can pop up and say whatever they want to say. I have a 20 and a 23-year-old who were listening to all of the propaganda that was being thrown out there, conspiracy theories, the chips being placed, all of that other stuff. They chose to talk about it in venues and in forums. And of course, they got the vaccine because their mama told them, you're gonna get the vaccine or you're not gonna live here. You know, we need to, as young adults, impart that wisdom upon our young ones, because how many, I don't know if you can run some kind of a statistical analysis, how many people are in that 20 to 30-year-old range that are listening to this now? It's the adults that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that are listening to this right now. So that wisdom that we gain from this, we need to impart it. We need to plant that seed. And we need to say, there's no reason to be fearful. Use what God gave us. Use the wisdom that we've gained. Use our minds and be forward-thinking and intelligent individuals that we are to research, and to look into things and look at what's really going on. So I think, you know, dealing with trauma, talk about it, research on your own, research with others, and share that knowledge. And that's how we move through the trauma. Not forget, but that's how we move through.
Alaska, were you going to say something?
I just wanted to say how incredible this is to witness just all of you speaking right now. I think it's so important to have this conversation. Me, myself, and a lot of, our community doesn't get this. They don't get, you get to the media, they're not after trying to drop these little nuggets, to us. A lot of this stuff feels like really over our head. You don't hear like the breakdown of the vaccine. You don't hear any of this. Is blowing my mind. Literally, I'm sitting here like, I wish this was on the news, but it's like not. And this is so important. This is so incredibly important. So just wanted to throw that in there. It's just, thank you for being here. It's at 12. So we're going to wrap up this segment of the conversation, but you've all received a Zoom link in the Eventbrite, and also we'll post it in the chat. And what I'm thinking about is that Corey says, how do you help someone who is anti-science that now holds anti-vax climate deniers? How can we reach them? Because I hear all this amazing information, and yes, I have been illuminated and informed by the level that you guys, how you've expressed things today. But then I think to some of my friends or the people that I know who are like, I'm not going to get that vaccination. And I am, from this conversation, I feel even more compelled to participate in this and create change. But at the same time, it is so difficult to really sort of, to really convince that other person. And so maybe people have individual questions, et cetera, and you guys can give them the magic pill, because I can't. And so that would be the opportunity for you guys to continue in further dialogue with the experts as long as they can. People may not be able to be there for too long, but as much as we can, and engaging with the other members of the CAB community. Let me also say this.
You guys are just seeing me as the moderator, and I want to say that it takes a whole village to put this together. And I want to thank the cab producers, the people at Outside In. Know that there are a lot of people who are working behind the scenes in order to make this happen. And we really appreciate you guys for joining us in this part of the conversation. Click the link if you want to have any further convo. We'll be talking a little bit longer. Okay?